Hello, my name is Marjaneh Rouhani, and I'm very honored to be in your presence today in the international broadcast through the television Iran Aryai that is supported by each and every one of you across the world, especially thinking of you, Iranians inside Iran, who have been taken hostage by a brutal multi-corporational mafia cartel. There is no other way of describing this system that's calling itself Islamic Republic, because as we see, there is a lot of chaos. And if you want to talk about the climate, if you want to talk about the financial issues, if you talk about the resources we have, if you want to talk about the horrid condition of children living on the streets and selling merchandise, and we are facing a huge catastrophic moment in history of Iran. And I'm sure many other countries are sharing our economical issues and our moral decline, as we are even experiencing in the United States, in Europe. And so there are lots of things to talk about. There's a lot of issues to discuss. And honestly, I don't know where to start, because it seems like our social contracts are on the verge of collapsing. And if we don't stand up, each one of us, from anywhere we are in the world, then we will be at the disposal of the technocrats, a few technocrats, and a few people who are self-declared elites, and who are going to be directing our moralities, our values, and all the accomplishments that our ancestors have fought to bring us to freedom of thought, or what we thought we have, our democracy. And what we're experiencing as human beings is that arguments or discussions or what we hold dear to us, our families, they don't exist. They don't have value. And everything is top down. And if you discuss it in any other way, you either get deplatformed or censored or thought of as somebody who's, get marginalized. And it's just not a nice feeling to even be thinking that you cannot hold a meaningful discussion. And this is not a moment in history that we can talk about just, hi, how are you, and how's the weather? Because everybody is carrying a huge and heavy cross on their back, to say the least. From many respects, if you want to look back at least the past 2 years, it has come to vision in a more meaningful way, more visual way. And it's we live in a time of urgency and crisis, and if we don't come together, then we're gonna have a collapse of civilization, as a matter of fact. And one of the things that we and Siavashde, our great producer, we were discussing before the program, is the issue of the television programs, or people who are famous and become celebrities, and they they play movie as a movie stars. They become prominent, and as the news apparently are coming out of Iran, is that a lot of unwanted sexual advances, rapes, and very horrid events are happening to women in cinema. And of course, there's lots of information that's coming out of Iran about just ordinary married women who have to basically to pass the day and provide means for their family, even if they're married, to commit something they don't want to do, like I don't know if you want to call it exchanging money for sex. I don't know what's the proper word to say it, because it's not a pleasant experience for a woman, and women do it to make the means when they do this kind of thing to provide for their families, and they are battered and mistreated by the community, by the culture, or anywhere you are, and very disrespected in that sense. Whereas the woman is actually is doing something that they don't like to do to provide for their family. And I think, we have a great warrior of our during the past 43 years who was unfortunately brutally killed by the Islamic Republic terrorist regime, Dr. Feridun Farrokhzad, who was killed unfortunately in Germany. And he used to say it's a lot worse to be a prostitute of your brain, like prostituting your information and selling information to evil, as a matter of fact, versus selling your body. And I truly find meaning in that, and that we have to really understand what is happening. Now, there are two different issues when I started talking about the criminal behavior from the men in cinema in Iran, that's basically happening to the women who just want to kind of get famous or be glamorous, and there's no fault to that. But then because these men are holding the power, they use their power to basically pressure the women to do something they don't want to do, rape them. And then in Iran, if you are known to have lost your virginity or you're sleeping with someone, then it's just like worse than any crime you can imagine. And it's just a horrid condition to, even for a woman to feel they are living in that environment. It's a very closed environment, and the woman is always to blame. And I'm here to sit here, and I think all of us, each one of us, those who are at least listening to this program, anybody who's been a victim of violent crime, they really need to start talking about things that have happened to them. And because by talking, we sort things out in our brain and really come to the conclusion at the end. I mean, it takes time, but the conclusion of it, long story short, is basically the person is the victim. The person who's the crime has been committed onto is the victim, but then the person who has victimized the individual always holds a upper hand as like a bully, and kind of saying that if you didn't dress like this, if you didn't behave like this, your eyes were asking for it, and just putting the guilt and shame onto the person who's been victimized. Now, of course, in the United States, actually, I want to share my just observation, and before even all of these crimes came to sight, because there's a lot of crimes even on this side of the water, we call it, that is just surfacing, that's just beyond belief and just so hard to even talk about and even broadcast pictures. And that is what I was observing from years ago when you would see Disney pictures, or you would see some of these movies that there are kids who are playing, and they never seem to, at least from a mother perspective or a doctor perspective, because you really don't have to be a doctor to really doctor each other or kind of know medical information. Human being really stores a lot of medical information, and we've learned it through history. This modern medicine is manifestation of a lot of industrialization, modernization, and we can talk, that's a separate argument altogether. And it just kind of, it's more of an organized medicine, I want to say. But just being aware, like a physician or a physician eye or a mother's eye, I want to say, because most mothers are the best physicians. They pick up things so quickly, it's unbelievable. And fathers too, actually, who are bonded. It's very important for a father to bond the first few months with the baby. And anyhow, you would see these young actors not really grow tall or grow to look like accomplish their normal, what you would anticipate their normal height would be. They would look like they're shorter, they're smaller, and they're not, their eyes are not smiling. So it's a very, if you just look and use our eyes in a very critical way, and that's one of the most important senses, of course, and we need to use it more among each other instead of just staring at our iPhones or all these electronic devices that are trying to hijack our mind and put us in a trance, and so that we cannot make decision and interfere with our decision making. And that's a big question in terms of why doesn't a child grow, and that is indicative of pressure, torture, mental torture or mental abuse, or feeling like they have to be a certain shape, or they need to stay small, and they would eat less and they wouldn't get nutrients, or they don't play outside, or other things that we are hearing actually that are broadcasting all over, exploding all over the internet, exploding all over the newspapers, or the people's media, I want to say, independent media, who are trying to warn parents about the exploitation of families, children, women especially, in cinema, in theater. And of course, I've been more of my life, twice more of my life, a lot more in the United States. So when I started kind of reconnecting with my roots in Iran and actually started practicing more Farsi and reconnecting with the culture that I hold very dear to my heart. Every day is a new discovery, and first of all, I want to thank everyone because I learn new words in Farsi every day. I learn to how to read poetry and all that. But the more I learn and the more I compare with the American culture, the American process, and the way people are with Iranians are so similar, and it's as if we are moving in a very parallel condition, and if we know what's happening in Iran to people, we can predict what will happen to Americans. And all these catastrophic events Americans are experiencing, Iranians have been through, and we are not going in a good direction. And I know, for example, there was an announcement from NASA, for example, about the future of Iran in 30 years. And I think I repeated it again a couple of sessions ago, in that in 30 years, Iran is going to have absolute drought and it's not going to be livable. First of all, there's a lot of talk about NASA and how it broadcasts a lot of propaganda. And they have to come clean in terms of, they've lost a lot of credibility, because it seems like everything they say is more political rather than based on science. They basically, what we've noticed, especially during the past 2 years, it may have gone a lot longer, but because of this pandemic that became global, a lot of us had a lot of questions and started reading, learning, looking at things in a different way, looking at things in the way it was being unusually presented, and basically using the time in a productive way to really navigate in a more meaningful way. And during this time when the clock kind of seems to have stopped in 2019, because actually even it's symbolic of how this pandemic is called still 19, because, in medicine, when we go forward, the reason it was called 19, that means it had 19 mutations or 19 transformations, and which, by the way, I don't remember a 1 or a 2 or a 3. I remember SARS-CoV-1, and I remember now this one being called SARS-CoV-2, but I don't remember the numbers of 1 through 19. But by now, because the year is 2022, we should have a different name for it. And of course, when they talk about it, it's called a variant, and the variants have been, basically the names have been under question, because it seems like a big comedy going on among a few, and it's basically the comedy is being run at the laugh at our cost, in a sense that this most recent one that I can't even wrap my head around it is called, it was called first BA1, and then the second one was called BA2, and it's just like simple analogy or simple interpretation, or why would you call something a ba, and it's like a ba, it's like a sheep, and then a ba is like a sheep. So somebody's really having fun at our cost, and it's really not nice and pleasant. And a lot of groups, a lot of humanitarian professionals, from lawyers, doctors, politicians, diplomats, actors, actresses, as a matter of fact, a lot of people have contributed a lot to basically putting a lot of light on the issues that are going on. And so we have the rape of individuals, we have the rape and or mental or physical abuse of children, and it's not unique to Iran or the United States or Africa or China or England or Germany or Bangladesh or Afghanistan. It seems like we are all being attacked at the same time within multiple versions or by multiple means. And it seems like each one of these attacks have been calculated and have been done in a singular way. And now a major all-level attack is happening to humanity. And at least I can speak on here, because I'm experiencing within my blood and bones in the sense that it was a shocking news when last night people were reporting that a major story about a waste medical automobile was carrying about 100 full-term, near full-term, or babies that could have survived, that were dismembered, and they were really brutally aborted or killed, and apparently, and that was discovered by a few women who questioned what is this medical waste car doing here, and they come to know that these medical waste are children who've been dismembered or kind of killed near term. And when the matter was brought into authorities by the mayor of DC, the mayor is basically throwing her hands up and saying she's not going to investigate. And I think, just the news of it is going to really should wake up our conscience about what is happening here, what's going on. And we have so much information that's evolving against humanity, that instead of getting shocked or paralyzed or frozen, which shocking news does to us, we should really get mobilized, and we have a choice: fight or basically fright. And instead of really running away with to the hills, which is quite tempting, taking our kids and just running to the hills, going to the caves, going to the jungle, going to some farm, it just seems quite tempting and more seductive by the minute. However, even that has been sabotaged, because come to light, basically a lot of land has been grabbed by these so-called multinational corporations for purchasing these lands aggressively. And there is not a moment that a sign does not go up across the world in very, just even remote places, prohibiting people from crossing to cross the line to go close to the beach or the mountains or the forest. And this is basically what in English, when you want to trap the herd, you call it calling, C-U-L-L-I-N-G. And it's interesting when calling is for the herd, or for basically cattle. That's the word that's used for. And then we come across with the vocabulary that the fancy corporations are kind of rolling out their bylaws or new information and talking about stakeholders. So, and then you read the information closely and you just see a lot of anti-humanitarian against the issues that are completely opposite of our social contracts that we have made during the past century to really solidify our humanity, prioritize our law and order, and that for all humans to be equal, not for some to be equal more than others, like the animal farms where Napoleon, the pig, was making decisions and monopolizing the society. And so when we look at all the announcements or these new memos being rolled out by these corporations, they're talking about the stakeholders, and when you put the two and two together and connect the dots, it's like you start wondering, are we the stake and somebody, in the corporation or these few people who are the stakeholders. They're holding the stake. We are the stake and they are the holders. You cannot not think about that. And if that's another joke or that's another way that we are being insulted, that we don't matter, I have news for a lot of these people, because Iranians, for that matter, have survived through so many ups and downs that, and we have a lot of common historical consciousness that is networked, connected to all of us, basically, that connects all of us. The inner connectivity is amazing. That we've survived the Mongolian invasion, and that was the most brutal invasion that really, I think, maybe killed about 2/3 of population in Middle East, and it was stopped by Iranians after 120 years, and that's a long story, but because Iranians have been through a lot of ups and downs, and they have triumphed, and they really show up to a triumph out of nowhere, and they didn't use iPhones, they didn't use common technology that is so available to us. And I think they will come through this in a very unexpected way, in a very surprising way, and basically a step forward to save humanity again. But in that, Iranians, I don't think they're alone now, because the Americans are waking up every day to more awareness, to question why are these over-sexualization or these discussions that are being promoted in elementary school, in pre-grade school with the children happening. This is not something we have done in the past. School is for a child to learn alphabet, is to learn geography, is to learn history. And actually, even years before, I wondered how come children are not taught finances, but the moment they hit age 18, they get a credit card. And they don't know even how to file taxes. They don't know about taxes. They don't know about money. And money is basically the way you really orient yourself and navigate your life and balance your existence to provide for your family. And a lot of people, I have seen in my practice, actually have fear of money. Talk about fear of virus, fear of germs, fear of heights. There are people who unknowingly, as a matter of fact, it's the least identified, maybe undiagnosed fear or phobia that is discussed, and that's a fear of money. They don't look at their budget. People don't look at how much they have. People don't want to look at their bank account. They don't want to look at their paycheck. They don't want to know they may look at the paycheck, but they don't want to see how much was deducted, or what was it deducted for, where the money is going. You have this $500 being taken out for this issue, $200 going for here, $300, and it's all chunked up in a way that you get $400 every 2 weeks, and then $300 of it is already taken out. On the surface, you have been paid $700, but actually what comes to your hand is $400. But even that is such an obstacle for people to really manage. I'm not talking about even, of course, with the inflation. The amount I'm talking about is quite little, because you really have to maintain a minimum living. And I wanted to actually remind everyone there's a book that I really loved, and one of the quotes in the book. The name of the book was Castle, I think. And the lady who wrote the book, amazing lady, and had a big tour. And it talks about, actually the quote from the book is like, if the parents are organized and willing to bring the money into the household, then no one will go hungry, no matter how much their paycheck is. And that's a profound statement, because, you know, this book actually talks about a really sick, mentally ill mother and a very abusive father, and the children really get raised on their own, but quite resilient. But in a sense, emphasizes how organizing money is not just about money, it's about taking care of our young, taking care of our home, taking care of our dignity. And if you have a little bit of extra, sharing it with other people, because money is for living, and basically nobody takes it with them. And we see there are a few people currently at this moment. Like, for example, we have these few corporations, 3 or 5 of them at the moment, like BlackRock, Vanguard, Berkshire Hathaway, all these corporations that they're not even transparent to the public, and we don't know what they're up to, but they are, because they're so wealthy, because their revenue probably is much more than some countries put together. They can call policies. They can order things to be done, and then we are facing a very detrimental moment in history, where if somebody is just like, because they have a lot of money and wealthy, and they're calling the shots and ordering things to be done a certain way, and it's seen a lot of times that's contradicting our human values, our social contracts, our Bill of Rights, our Constitution, that we have been given through a lot of sacrifices through our ancestors, a lot of wars, a lot of treaties, a lot of agreements. And at the moment, to say simply, it's like Normandy never happened. The Berlin Wall never fell, or if it fell, it just happened to include all of West and the East, with, of course, the China Belt and Road Initiative that I'm sure all of you are aware of, and there is barely any country left that has signed on, and part of these signatures include, or agreements include, for that country to agree that Taiwan is a state of China, which has a huge impact in the free world's economy, independence, technology, and basically it means China will have the sole access to most world. And then because the rest of them are apparently, most of the remaining are in Ukraine. That seems to be a lot of chaos happening over there, which we really, other than propaganda from this side, that side, upside, downside, or a lot of celebrities going there, visiting, and camera, light, and action being present all the time. But there is no, basically, because of how the trust has been broken between the heads of the states, the bureaucrats who are supposed to be on humanity's side, people who we have elected in each country. When I mean elected, basically, They are not working for the benefit of humanity. They have been caught lying. I cannot brush it in any other way. It's not even a white lie. Lying right out, lying to all of us, and saying something to us for us to do something, or ordering a law or ordinance or something that we are supposed to follow, but they are exempt from it, and they have no consequences when they don't follow, and creating basically a very bad feeling, not just mistrust, but also promoting a caste system. And to that, I have to mention that, for example, in the state of New York, they are still insisting that the 2-year-olds should be wearing a mask and everybody else is not wearing a mask. We have our VP, the first woman VP, who gleefully and happily smiles and takes a huge picture with children who are all masked, and she's widely smiling and she's not wearing a mask. And all of these visual clues for us to kind of really start questioning what is happening here. These are all representatives. These are people who are supposed to be working for us. And then if anybody asks questions, they're just basically dismissed or marginalized or kind of outcasted. And part of really growth, we all know, is asking questions. As children, we encourage our children to ask questions. So we are seeing a lot of upside down, insane behavior that is promoting caste system, class system, that we have fought against for many centuries to come to this point. And we are at the point of losing our social contracts. Now, the Iranians inside Iran, which, by the way, talking about Iran, I want to really appreciate all of your warm wishes. They were so heartwarming just to read them, and all the happy pictures that everybody had posted about Shahbanu Farah of Iran, who we love quite dearly, all of us, and she has done so much globally, not just for Iran, globally for men and women, and really patron of the arts, patron of the humanity and human rights, and really amazing person. I want to mention again in English, at least in our English program, for our English listeners, she's known to have gone among people with leprosy, where at the time people were quite afraid of people who had contracted leprosy, and they were outcasts of society. So she kind of really promoted well-being and medication and how they can incorporate to society. And these are the things that you never forget. History never forgets. And even though we have this digital book burning that is happening, for example, I want to remind everyone there was this pandemic that happened around 2009, 2010, and the World Health Organization came out and said this is it was just staged as it was 2 years ago with this current pandemic, and they just rolled out an injection, and a bunch of people were unlucky enough to really die, and they exaggerated the numbers. Bloomberg wrote a huge article about it, what went wrong and how these fabrications came about, and how they had to really fold all the things that was happening. And so that was a significant article that was published in Bloomberg and in other places. And when people started talking about it, it magically got burned on digital space, got burned in Google. And of course, a lot of people don't use Google anymore. But that's important part of history, and the similarities between swine flu in 2009, 2010, it's so close to what happened, except this time it seems like it was like a military or a army, retreating at the time because, they were caught in a big lie, and they retracted and they kind of went to their corner to come back prepared. How did they get prepared? I mentioned Mr. Klaus Schwab quote, "We penetrate cabinets and that's how we function," quote unquote. And mentioning Mr. Klaus Schwab, you cannot have a program not mentioning him, because he seems to be working with a lot of corporations and setting a manifest for some sort of a revolution he talks about that's completely unnecessary, harmful to our environment, harmful to our social contracts, actually nullifies our social contracts, and basically eliminating a lot of active humanitarian work and eliminating jobs and causing a lot of pain and suffering, and talking about how these people speak from two sides of their mouths. For example, in Africa, about 70% of their fertilizer come from Russia, and since they have put in these sanctions, the first continent that's going to be hit with massive starvation is going to be Africa. And then comes the third world countries that are going to be hit with massive starvation, massive inflation, or loss of the integrity and dignity of what they have, because these corporations or these manifest this gentleman is trying to roll out that focuses on robotics and elimination of humans, because humans are bad. And that's why probably they want to change the genome, and to quote again what they say, that we are not special and they can hack us and they can do this and they can do that. All the really two-dimensional or very black and white view of living, or view of life, or view of humanity and human, if you really have any knowledge about even biology or sociology, it's a very sophisticated creature, as a matter of fact, and we have many evidences to that effect, which we'll leave it for later discussion. But if we don't stand up, because these individuals now, they're super wealthy and they're directing our governments across the world, and they have signed contracts that are redacted, as a matter of fact, they are blacked out, so we don't even know what they signed on our behalves. Then we're going to be in big trouble, because what they are focusing on is not the benefit of humanity or how people are going to live. It's basically how the bottom line or the money is going to be for the corporation, or how a few are going to be doing very, very, very well. Like, for example, like a few days ago, maybe you heard that the first private flight went to space, and there were like 5 people who were smiling in their space suits. And so you have that category, and then you have billions of people who are not going to have access to just basic living condition, clean water, fresh air, which we see, for example, pictures coming out of Iran where you can barely see 2 feet from yourself because it's so much dust and so much. I mean, there's just people are not able to breathe, and this manipulation or engineering of the weather is not through the normal planetary behavior or scientific evolution that we are familiar with. It's through a completely engineered or man-made situation to really frustrate and eliminate humans. And there's no better way of saying it. Eliminating humans and basically for these corporations to rule supreme. And it's not even about ruling supreme if they respected our social contracts, but they talk about eliminating our social contracts by coming up with new constitution through World Health Organization, who, by the way, had that catastrophic or fiasco in 2010 by announcing a pandemic that was not a pandemic, and only a few people basically were hurt at the time, and they backed off again. And what happened with the World Health Organization, they went through some re-engineering and reconstruction until we came into the current system, where now they're basically short of getting militarized by having this pandemic new definition of a pandemic, where it will be driven by their announcements, like they're gonna top down say there is a pandemic somewhere and everybody has to get locked down and stay in their coffin or in their pods and cannot leave the house, cannot leave. And we see it happening in China, in Shanghai. That's the most populated, actually most prosperous location in China. And there are people who are trapped, their kids taken away, they're yelling at night because they cannot leave their homes. And what's happening in China is a petri dish of sampling of what's going to be repeated on a larger scale in different locations. And basically what you can see, in a sense, is the elimination of human rights to have access to mobility, to travel, to spend. And basically they had this even a very interesting, again, self-declared world government conference in Dubai a couple of weeks ago, where one of the ladies who was speaking at the first hour said, are we going to have this digital currency that's going to be completely 100% controlled, and we can do, the central banks are going to be completely in charge, and that's going to eliminate basically the human will. And from day one, I think when a child is even moaning to get a milk, they're showing their will. And this is all going against human nature, and not just human nature, just nature in general. You're seeing these upside down promotion of quote unquote what it was used to be global warming. Now it's climate change, and we have this insane number of solar panels that are spread all over the greens, the rainforest, the top of the mountains, and destroying what's green, and claiming that these solar panels are going to help humanity. And basically there's just this biggest fraud ever implemented on human brain and human propaganda against humanity since maybe the tulip mania, or on the level of slavery, a lot worse than what happened to during the Pharaoh's time, when they were building the pyramids, and people were getting killed and nobody would even pick up their bodies. People would move on just like nothing happened. And we have come a long way from those days, except all of a sudden we have this beautiful building in, I think in Qatar, or in English we call it Qatar. And to her credit, there's an Egyptian lady who designed this stadium for the upcoming games. And when they talked about building this stadium, every day that they have been working on finishing this stadium to be on time, there has been one person who has died. And I know there was some news about the immigrant workers who, there were like a few hundred who had died, and people were kind of angry about that and expressing their concern about what was going on. But from the pyramids of Egypt to this Qatar stadium, and then the few hundred, which are not a few hundred, every day, those are for just the immigrant workers who were working to build. But there were other workers who were not immigrants. And every day that this building was started constructing, one person has died. And this is a huge, huge red flag for all of us. We have China enslaving the Uyghur population in pods and harvesting their organs and getting their organs while they're alive and shipping it to Muslim countries because they want halal organs. We have children being trafficked, and the leader of this child trafficking ring who's been basically busted and trialed, and although the trial was kind of sealed, the documents were sealed, but none of the clients of this lady, Ghislaine Maxwell, who was supposedly the comrade or the person who was working with Jeffrey Epstein, who was the most prolific child trafficker, pedophile in current history. There was another one, I think, who was a close friend of Charles of England, who basically, you have seen his pictures. I don't remember his name. But this lady is supposedly in prison. Jeffrey Epstein supposedly committed suicide while the two persons or two guards who were watching him on suicide watch, supposedly they were playing video games or they were on a break. But just to open a parenthesis, that those same two are given amnesty or immunity about not talking about things or not divulging information. So there's just a lot of, I want to say, corruption, very, very terrible corruption. This is not corruption about just money. This is corruption against humanity, corruption against children who are being taken away from their families, corruption against women who are raped, and if they complain or they file a suit, they are told they are prostitutes and they asked for it. We have all these theaters unfolding across the world, and it's supported by the mainstream media, because the mainstream media has become a propaganda or a microphone for these corporations who are trying to use the mainstream media as a weapon of mass distraction. And despite all of this, I want to, because one of the things about this program, we have tried to really direct all of us to a solution. The solution is our rule of law. The solution is our social contracts. The solution is to know we do have, most of the countries do have a constitution. And we know, for example, when the news came out of Peru that people are doing an uprising and they were trying to minimize, the mainstream was trying to minimize that they're rising up because they're hungry. No, they were rising up the day after they found out that Peruvian government supposedly had signed on the contract with the China Belt and Road Initiative. Now, coming back to basically see that the same pattern, the same thing, the same confiscation of human property, human rights to travel free, human rights to freely breathe oxygen, human right to accept or decline treatment of medicine or injection or surgery or chemotherapy. And all of a sudden, we are faced with a World Health Organization who is going to be coming up with some sort of a constitution that's going to be supreme to overhead of all the countries. And unless the solution is us, the solution is each one of us to do what we can do in our power to basically inform each other. Now, with the information comes a lot of responsibility. Now, we basically from the movement in Iran, from at least what I'm gathering, people are really organized. People know what they want. People, not that just they've asked for many years for what they want. They're really collaborating and kind of separating themselves from the corrupted Islamic Republic operants who actually have gone to send people to other countries to really collaborate with the corruption in other countries, and that's aside. But in Iran, people have tried, even though the economy is terrible in light of the sanctions, not that if the sanctions were lifted, that is a multinational corporation, mafia cartel, each one of them connected to a different country and trying to really exploit different regions of the country that belongs to Iranian, not just now, for at least 2,500 years, for 3,500 years, 7,000 years. I know a lot of discussions are going on about, for example, when did Ukraine happen, connected to Russia, Russia connected to Iran. But Iran integrity, the national integrity, we've been a nation for a long, long time, as long as there's been a language, as long as there's been basically domestication of animals or agriculture. Iranians have been living in this great land, and that's how they've become a great network of different colors, different backgrounds, different features, and they get along. And in that, I want to remind everyone that Book of Kings, Shahnameh, is our basically the pillar that we all gather around and respect. And we know that by being together, being honest and respectful of each other, not just among Iranians, among all of us, all nations, we will be able to pass all of these evil events that are manufactured by what Zartosh the Great called Ahriman. But as a Queen of Iran, Shabanu Farah Pahlavi says, the light will always very much.